When Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu entered the Grand Hall of the United Nations, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. His reputation as a fierce speaker preceded him, and diplomats leaned forward, waiting to hear the words of a leader who often wielded rhetoric like a weapon. When he began, his tone was sharp, confident, and commanding. "We will not tolerate resistance. We will not accept defiance. And if war must come, it will come without mercy," he declared, his voice echoing against the marble walls. The chamber fell silent. Heads turned, eyes lowered. For decades, many leaders had avoided confronting Israel directly on the global stage, fearing political isolation, retaliation, or the loss of international support. Netanyahu expected the same reaction again: silence, fear, and submission. But what followed was something he could not have anticipated. From the delegation of Burkina Faso, a young man in military attire shifted in his seat. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, known across Africa for his uncompromising stance against imperialism and neocolonialism, leaned back and let out a laugh, loud, unrestrained, and utterly shocking in the solemn chamber. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Delegates turned their heads in disbelief. Laughter. At Netanyahu's threats? It was unthinkable. Traoré stood up, his eyes locked on Netanyahu. His expression carried neither fear nor hesitation, but something far more dangerous to those who wield power through intimidation: ridicule. "You speak of mercy as if you have ever known it," Traoré said calmly, his words carrying across the hall without the aid of a microphone. "But mercy has not been in Gaza. Mercy has not been in the streets of Palestine. What you call defense, the world calls occupation. And what you call war, history will call a crime." The hall erupted into whispers. Some diplomats shook their heads in disapproval. Others hid their smirks behind papers. Netanyahu's jaw tightened. He had been challenged before, but never like this, never with laughter, and never by a leader so unexpected, so defiant. Traoré continued, unflinching. "For too long, Africa has been told to stay silent, to bow, to take orders from powers who write history with bombs and justify it with lies. But we will not bow. Not to you. Not to any empire. Our people have bled enough, and we recognize the same blood spilled in Gaza. Their fight is our fight." Every sentence felt like a hammer striking the walls of the chamber. Cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the raw fire in his eyes. The world was watching, and Traoré knew it. He raised his hand, pointing directly at Netanyahu without hesitation. "You stand here demanding the world recognize your security, while you deny another people the right to breathe. You invoke history, but erase theirs. You demand justice for yourself, while delivering injustice to millions." The accusations were direct, piercing, and unfiltered. Many leaders had criticized Israel before, but always wrapped in the careful language of diplomacy. Traoré abandoned all pretense. His words were sharp, dangerous, but they carried a truth that could not be ignored. "You call yourself a democracy," Traoré pressed on. "But what democracy builds walls to cage others? What democracy bombs children and calls it collateral damage? A democracy of bombs is no democracy at all. It is tyranny wearing the mask of legitimacy." As he spoke, the significance of the moment became clear. This was not just an African leader defending Gaza. This was Africa itself, standing up in a chamber where its voice had long been ignored. For centuries, Africa has been told to remain in the shadows, while others speak for us. But today we remind you, Africa has its own voice. Africa has its own truth. And Africa will not be silent in the face of oppression, whether it comes from the West or from you, Netanyahu. The applause began softly, scattered across the hall. A few diplomats clapped hesitantly, looking around to see who would follow. But within moments, the hall was alive with applause, a sound rarely heard in the middle of such confrontations. Netanyahu's face turned red with anger. He leaned forward, gripping the podium, ready to retaliate. But for the first time, his words faltered. He had faced presidents, kings, generals, but never a captain from Burkina Faso who stood without fear. "You think laughter will shield you?" Netanyahu shot back, his voice cracking with fury. "You are young. You do not understand the realities of war. Your people." But before he could finish, Traoré interrupted, his voice rising above. Netanyahu's. My people understand war better than you ever will. My people lived through colonization, exploitation, and betrayal by the very nations that claim to defend human rights. We know occupation when we see it, and we will not allow silence to be our complicity. The room froze. Netanyahu, the seasoned politician, was left speechless by the sheer force of Traoré's conviction. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled furiously, and millions watching from around the world leaned closer to their screens. This is not just about Gaza, Traoré declared, his tone steady and unyielding. This is about every oppressed people, every colonized land, every voice silenced by power. Today, we say enough. Today, we remind the world that the oppressed will no longer beg for justice. They will claim it. And then came the words that left the entire hall breathless. You threaten war without mercy. But remember this, empires fall, occupations end, and no wall, no bomb, no army can silence a people's cry for freedom. Gaza will not forget. Africa will not forget. And history will not forgive. The applause thundered through the chamber. Some delegates stood to their feet, clapping with a passion rarely seen in diplomatic gatherings. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Netanyahu's threats, once feared, now felt hollow. The spotlight had shifted. The world was no longer watching him. It was watching Traoré. As Traoré sat down, the weight of his words lingered in the air like smoke after an explosion. This wasn't just a speech. It was a turning point, a moment when silence shattered, when truth broke through layers of fear, and when a young African leader reminded the world that even the smallest nations could shake the mightiest powers with nothing but courage and conviction.